They're going to need to unmute.
Good evening. Ian, do you want to get us started?
Sure, absolutely. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ian Dyer. I am the Division Disaster Director for Blue Sky in the Pacific Division. Hopefully everybody can hear me all right. I'm just going to turn my camera on for one quick minute. I know that bandwidth has been a challenge all around in this day and age, so I'll try to conserve as much of it as I can by keeping my camera off. But yeah, I've been with Pacific Division now for a year. I've been with Red Cross for 14 years as an employee, and prior to that, 15 years as a volunteer in anything and everything health and safety. So it's a real pleasure to be with you all this evening to talk about delegation. Sherry?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Sherry Lewis. I'm the Division Disaster State Relations Director, Volunteer Partner for the state of California. In other words, I'm one of Luke's right hands. So good evening. Thank you so much for joining us for the Art of Delegation. I started with the American Red Cross as an event-based volunteer, or an EBV, at the campfire. So I'm still a newbie in many respects, but I've brought a lot of experience from my real world life, and I've utilized them as best as I can in the volunteer opportunities I've been given with the American Red Cross. And I've enjoyed every minute of it. So before we get into it, let's go over some of the team's meeting norms. As Kirsten mentioned, please keep yourself muted unless you want to speak out at one of the opportune times when we call upon you to share examples or ask questions. Also, please click on chat and share any time in chat if you have a question or a comment that we can mention in the presentation. And also you can raise your hand to be called upon at any time. And we will do our best to call upon you at an opportune moment. So I can't even speak tonight, but without further ado, let's get on to what you came for. There's always more work than there is time. So smart people learn how to delegate. Figuring out the who, what, and when of delegating can simplify your workload instantly. This confidence builder is about the art of delegation. So, you have way too much to do, you're buried in work, and it seems there's no way out from under it all. But there is delegation. Yes, you know it's important to do, and you know it will save you time and help others develop new skills, which is my favorite part. So why aren't you doing it? According to Harvard Business Review, delegation benefits managers, direct reports, and organizations. Yet, it remains one of the most underutilized and underdeveloped management capabilities. There are plenty of reasons why managers don't delegate. Some are perfectionists who feel it's easier to do everything themselves, and I have been guilty of that many a times, especially in my professional career when I was younger and I wanted to prove myself. Or that their work is better than others. And again, that comes down to I wanted to prove myself, and sometimes I wanted to outshine people. Some believe that passing on work will detract from their own importance, while others lack self-confidence and don't want to be upstaged by their subordinates. Letting go of these misconceptions can be extremely difficult. Giving up being the go-to expert takes a lot of confidence and perspective. Accepting that you can't do everything yourself is a critical first step to delegating. I'd like to see some hands out there of how many people have been guilty of any of the things I've mentioned. And you don't have to share which of those things, but please raise your hand and just let us know if you've been one of those people. I know I have. I'm going to not share my hand, but you know I'm one of those people. So let's talk about delegating, and specifically before delegating. It will help you organize the process and clearly identify the tasks that you want completed. Classify all your tasks into 3 categories to determine if you should do them or if you should delegate them. The first category is personal tasks. The second is management tasks. And the third is team tasks. We're going to talk about each a little bit more. Personal tasks are things that you can do yourself, and they don't develop your team. So there's no point in delegating them. Management tasks. These are tasks that require the right level of trust, authority to act, and certain levels of responsibility. Team tasks are definitely the ones you can and should delegate in order to be more productive and create a better team dynamic. What should be delegated? I'm going to start with one of my favorite quotes by not one of my favorite people, by the way, but I do appreciate it. He says, "Don't be a bottleneck. If a matter is not a decision for the president or you, delegate it. Force responsibility down and out. Find problem areas, add structure, and delegate. The pressure is to do the reverse, but resist it." And that's from our former Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld. Team tasks should be delegated, especially those that are challenging and exciting tasks your team would be able to perform. Repetitive tasks that have to be carried out on a weekly, monthly, or any regular type of basis or interval at the beginning or at the end of a project. Tasks that would develop your team. Tasks your team members would be interested in, or that they could do better due to the skills they have. Let them outshine you. Let them shine for you. Tasks that are time consuming or that are not your concern. You can delegate the authority and responsibility to carry out the necessary activities that will produce a result. People get into trouble when they try to delegate and dictate the method to get there or the process to put in place. Additionally, agree on how you will be informed and how frequently you will be informed when you delegate, so you can kind of keep track and keep tabs and help if needed, but let them be the leaders in it. So now we're going to talk a little bit about reverse delegation. And that happens when delegated tasks end up back in your bucket because they shouldn't have been delegated to begin with. An important thing to remember about delegation is delegation, unlike integrity, is not always a good thing. Delegation to the wrong person at the wrong time can do more harm than good. So the goal should never be I want to delegate more. The goal should be, I want to delegate more effectively. And if we look at delegation, there are two reasons people may feel that a leader is not delegating effectively. One is micromanagement, feeling like the leader is getting too involved with the other person, or the other might be something different. Management tasks and personal tasks should not be delegated. If you find something has been delegated to you that is out of your realm, delegate up. Delegate back to the person with an explanation, or delegate up to another person who would be better at the task. This may be a mentoring opportunity for you to take advantage of. I recently was asked to do something and I didn't feel like I could answer effectively. So I delegated it up to another leader, not the leader who delegated it to me, but I asked for assistance and guidance and essentially passed the task on and just asked for a learning opportunity out of it. So you can delegate down, or I just learned how to delegate up. So don't be afraid to do that, especially if you're trying to learn new things. Also, other tasks that you should not delegate are things that are boring or unimportant, things that are confidential or involving sensitive or private information. Don't delegate anything that's unclear. Delegating tasks that are unclear will be time consuming and bring no positive impact to you or to those you're delegating to. Let's take a look at the levels of trust pyramid. When you're delegating a job to someone, make sure you're not asking them to do something they're not ready for. Similarly, avoid asking them to do something that's too easy. Think about the last job you assigned to the delegate and identify where it is in the levels of trust pyramid. Then, when delegating, move them up one level of trust. For example, if you got them to recommend something the last time, this time get them to approve something. Let's look at each level. First, tell. Tell the delegate what to do. Once they've done it, tell them what to do next. When they're ready, move them to the next level, which is ask. Have the delegate ask about or investigate something and report back to you, at which point you will instruct them what to do next, which is to move on to the next level, which is recommend. Ask the delegate to look into something and give you their recommendations. Review these recommendations and together decide which, if any, to act upon. Once they're ready, move them up to the fourth level, which is approve. Ask the delegate to investigate something and decide what to do, making sure to check with you before going ahead, of course. And then once they've really done well at that level, move them up to the action stage. Have them act on something. Having defined in certain boundaries, have the delegate look into something, decide what to do, and provided it does not exceed these boundaries, go ahead and do it, informing you when they do. And then finally, getting them to the level of informing you. Ask the delegate to take care of some issue and just keep you informed of its progress. So you don't even have to do any of the other five levels. And to me, that is the most exciting moment. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Ian, who's going to share a video with us about training through delegating. So Ian, please take it over.
Thank you. So we've got a couple of videos, and one of our systems called Percipio doesn't allow access for all. We've had some conversations with National Headquarters Training to make it available to everybody in our enterprise. So this is kind of our little workaround. But as we watch these couple of videos, we'll start with one. I'll have a little bit of material, and then I will close out my section with one. Consider what might resonate as part of the speaker's brief, what may not necessarily resonate, and really interested in any takeaways you might have. And we'll also take a moment to check in to see if there's any questions in the chat box. So I'm going to go ahead and leap into share. This may just take one moment. Everybody should see Percipio, and we'll start with training through delegating.
Delegating, I think, is something that happens every day, whether you are a manager of 2 or, a VP of 300. You're delegating something, and you're delegating it to people. The difference I've found in my career growth is I sort of moved out of a minor management role to managing 20 people. And I was really fortunate that the company that I worked for recognized that it's not now task driven, it's people driven. That's the difference with your role. And they sent me to a course. And the first question that the teacher asked us all sitting in this room was, oh, all of you, when did you get promoted within the last 6 months? And a series of hands go up and so on and so forth. But what was important, he said, now how many of you have had training in managing people now that you have staff? And there's like 200 in the room, and you could see a very small percentage of hands go up. So what was important to me is to understand that, well, I can answer that question, or I can do that task in a quarter of the time it may take me to explain it to you or show you. The problem is that that's going to be a recurring issue. And if I keep doing that, I don't really need you because now I'm doing your job, but you don't grow. And more importantly, I think for all of us that have to be able to step back and say, person may not do it exactly like I'm going to do it. It isn't how you get there, it's what you get at the end. And really, that's really your role as a leader, looking at what's the end result that you're trying to achieve. And everybody works differently. Some people have a much more visual style, some people like to work alone, some people like to work in teams. But if they achieve the objective and the deadline's met, or the client's happy, whatever that project is, in the end, isn't that what is important? So I think for me to sit back, even for my own self, because I am a control freak and I do like to do things a certain way, and I have high standards and I'm a perfectionist, and I've heard all of those kinds of scenarios. But people have always said that they want to work with me. They're proud of what they do. We all want to belong to success. We don't want to be part of a failing team. So it really is something that you need to be conscious of every single day, every project. Maybe you could do that, but could someone else learn from it? Could they try it and you could guide them? And that's really something that I still do. I have an assistant who's very eager to learn. Every day she'll come in, I'd like to do something. I have to sit back and say to myself, what can I give her that is within her comfort zone and capability, but at the same time let her grow? And I think it's a skill that any leader needs to focus on, because I think we have a natural tendency. Most of us are the A-type personalities and, the really energetic people, and it's sometimes hard to share. And that's really what delegation is all about.
Okay. I'll get my slide deck up now, sorry. As we wait for that, any comments on whether those items resonated? We can even take a hand raise or two, I suppose, to see if we have anybody interested in sharing verbally. I see a few up. I think they may have been left over from earlier show of hands. One of the things that I take away from training through delegating, and it was mentioned earlier in the chat box, is the not wanting to overwhelm others, along with the success in being a leader. And I think it's really important for us to recognize that many hands make light work, and not any one person is expected to get all of this done. So I do want to make sure that we enter our delegative projects with a lot of communication, which is what we'll lead into next in talking about our communication strategy. So we need to make sure that we have as open a communication as possible with those members on our team. And we've got 4 elements that we'll share in improving clarity and direction on this strategy. So the first is being positive. I think of this as being a primer. We want to make sure that we really enter or broach a subject, broach a project with, a lot of positivity. We know that it could very well be challenging, but nobody wants to necessarily be a part of something that we're all naturally averse to, or there's some negativity behind it, and it just seems to be really a downer. So there's almost a sales pitch to it, but in everything that we do, certainly within the Red Cross, we know that we want to be courteous, and we should be courteous and respectful to one another, and our time and gifts of that time, as well as who it is that we serve, and who it is that we have as part of our team. We want to make those personal connections, and we want to be positive in a lot of our reinforcement. So we want to make sure that we are kind of recognizing and awarding those elements as we proceed forward in our project. and we want to discourage negativity. It doesn't mean that everything is sunshine and rainbows necessarily. It just means that we need to observe and take a step back in some stages and seek out help. Things may not always be ideal, but in the end, we'll get through it together. So the next piece is seeking and providing feedback. We want to solicit feedback and we want to provide feedback. So it goes both ways. Obviously, we want to have a dialogue. We don't want to just have a monologue and have our supervisor or a team member providing just an extraordinary or maybe even overwhelming material and feedback, but take a pause and really slow down in order to make sure or even ask if they can sort of repeat back or provide what I'm hearing is ... and making sure that we're all on the same page.
Ian,
so I'm just taking, yes, go ahead.
Can I break in? We had someone asking for methods to discourage negativity on that note.
All right. I know one of my methods is to really allow for a bit of a few minutes of griping. I know it might sound silly, but let's just take the negative head on and let's allow for just a few minutes of recreational complaining. And you know, this is really lousy, or it's this or it's that, and we just kind of get it off of our chest. And then we refocus and recenter ourselves to proceed forward with being much more productive conversation, I guess I would say. And sometimes, you know, that's just one piece of it, just as a team as a whole. And I've done that in projects where we've got a very big metric to attain in a short period of time. A lot of it depends upon the level of negativity, being able to interpret that. Is it one person? And we know that negativity, much like positivity, can be pretty infectious. So is it a person? Is it a theme? Is it something that is really related to the project? We could probably have a whole nother confidence builder session on that topic, Flynn. I think it's a great question, and it's just one of the tools I have is, in fact, you know, a few minutes of recreational complaining, and then, hey, we've got that in the clear, we're good, okay, let's move forward with some more productive and focused outcome type conversation. I hope that helped. Yep, and Barbara's got it. Sometimes people just need to vent, make the space for it. And again, it could be just not the wrong fit, you know. And we've spoken a little bit about the projects that we may be moving forward. And if folks really don't want to do it, maybe it's just a matter of ensuring. I was having even a conversation today. We've heard the term get people on the bus, get people moving forward. And once you're on the bus, making sure people are in the right seat on that bus, making sure that they're playing a role that they believe is rewarding to their time and their efforts. We don't want anybody to be feeling as though they're overwhelmed or that they're in a position to fail. So. It's a great point, Shelley, starting with the clear and precise goals and objectives. SMART is the acronym that I adhere to, and I think we talk about that later on in our session, but if not, I'll make sure that we loop back on SMART goals. So tying it in with keeping our team in the loop. So we want to be positive. We seek and provide feedback from one another. But certainly providing explanations and changes and being change managers with some of those decisions. Making sure that if we suddenly have a disaster occur? You know, how did we plan to it? Do we what can we plan for and communicate and absorb? And that goes into a lot of team resilience. People move, life happens. It could be something as minor as in my case, the system and software wanting to reboot themselves shortly before this course. It could be something much more extraordinary, but making sure that you're able to communicate with people and say, I was on track with this, something happened, I'm going to need X. Maybe it's more time, maybe it's more resources. But we want to be open, honest, and candid. We're going to briefly touch on the swarm leadership as one of the follow-up items as part of the slide deck. There's no ego, no blame. We want people to be honest and telling the truth. Be as forthcoming as you can. There really needs to be a sharing of information. Now, of course, there's potential projects and items that could come up that are private or confidential. And we're not saying to share those unless that group is well involved in those pieces and knowing what information is relevant and what can be shared. But without that trust and open and honest air of communication, there will certainly be an undercurrent of challenges as a result. And then finally, we talk about listening actively. And this is unique, I think, in our COVID environment with a lot of what we have going on virtually. So we do ask people, give your full attention. How do we check for understanding and comprehension? Normally in a classroom or an office setting, we'd be able to read some body language. We'd be able to observe a lot more than we can hear. But we also want to practice some level of grace, right? I might not be having the greatest hair day, so I choose to keep my camera off. Or I might have family here in my home, and I'm struggling and having the time to be able to focus. And I think that we've all been learning a lot in the past few months of being able to adapt and really strengthen our active listening skills. But it can be really tricky. Meetings after meetings after meetings on Teams or Zoom, and your email is still going off, or your phone or text message is still going off. So it's an exercise, and we really want to make sure that we're receiving the information, comprehending it, being able to recall and evaluate and provide that feedback, but without being able to intently engage in that group setting, you're liable to miss key elements. So it does, again, become more of a challenge in this environment, but certainly not impossible. It really just demands that we communicate and trust that we are open as a vessel, if you will, to sharing what our feelings might even be. And I go back to that key element that I always adhere to in swarm leadership, the tenet of no ego, no blame. So I'm going to go ahead and share the second video for this session, and just to share the questions again, interested in what you might find that resonates and what may not, and what takeaways you may have, as well as looking for any questions. Oh, I'm sorry, that's me getting ahead of myself. Thank you for your patience with this. And here we go.
Did you know that the number one derailer for managers is over-managing? In other words, tightly controlling and not delegating enough. So one of the questions we want to grapple with in order to be a very effective leader is to think about the issue of delegation at a more fundamental level and ask yourself, what's the price you pay for not letting go? Well, for many of us, that price actually can be translated in terms of a lack of advancement. People above us see that we are not letting go, that we need to be too much in the weeds, and decide that we don't have a strategic perspective. In addition, you pay a price downwards with your team. People who might actually have the capability of rising up and being very high performers are hampered by your own needs to control and stay in charge as the boss. So why might you want to hang on? Well, of course, a lot of us are perfectionists, and things are never done as well as we think they can be done. But again, you pay a high price for that mindset. Sometimes you don't want to push things out on people who are overworked and carrying a lot of load themselves. But again, there's a price to be paid for that. So we're going to focus in on delegation. And I'm going to ask you to think for a moment, where do you as an individual manager add the greatest value to your team? In what areas of expertise or skill? And then I'd like you to step back and ask yourself, well, what areas do you tend to add the least value, but you still like to be involved? So as you think about those two questions, I'd like you also then to think about your team, all the individuals who you lead, and assess them one by one and ask yourself, who has the strongest capabilities? And start by delegating with that individual. Give them some things that potentially you enjoy doing, but could help them further grow and advance. As you think about others who are less skillful, ask yourself what might be smaller tasks you could give them to get them going and let you delegate more. It's very important along the way, as you begin to learn to let go of more and more of your tasks and responsibilities, to think about milestones and checkpoints where those individuals and you can check in to make certain progress is being made. And you also need that for your own kind of sense of control. The second dimension that you need to be asking yourself is, what do I want done? Not how do I want things done? If you're a perfectionist, the how becomes very, very important to you. But by the way, almost all tasks can be done in multiple ways. There are many different ways up a mountain. And your approach, while it may be the most effective from your standpoint, actually may constrain others to do it in the way that they actually find it most effective. So instead of focusing so much on how things are done, focus on the outcome, on the what. Third, start thinking about what do you want from each individual. So with some who are more talented, more capable, more experienced, you might want them to bring you the recommendation. With others who are less experienced, you might want them to bring you a range of options so that then you can choose. And the third group, the most inexperienced, you may wish for them to simply bring you information from which you and they formulate a set of options, and then ultimately you choose one. So think carefully about where you would slot each of your team members into these three dimensions. Having the recommendation brought to you, having options brought to you, or having baseline information that allows you then to decide the right options and ultimately the right steps. Delegation is a critical part of your ability to lead, and you empower the people who work with you by delegating. You stifle them by controlling. It also is the key to getting higher in an organization, because more and more of the work that's done at the top has to do with strategic thinking, has to do with planning, has to do with bigger picture things that don't have a lot to do with minute control over the details.
All right. Any thoughts on, let me go ahead and get ahead to where we were earlier. You got it, Sherry, I think.
I got it.
All right. Let me take a look. I'm going to open up my chat box. Let's see. Useful video. Teresa said that she didn't see the video. Teresa, I'm hopeful that you were able to hear it okay. I hope that everybody was able to hear it, but I know that there's been some lag in certainly the bandwidth of the video feed itself. Any other? Excellent. That's good. Thank you. One of the things I take away from this, just to share to see if others, and I see, I think it was Janelle that mentioned this is just what she needed to see, and I think it's great. Focus on outcome, not the way we get there. I always adhere to lead by letting go, and one of the best compliments I think I've ever received had everything to do with a volunteer sharing with me that she really appreciated that I gave her a task and then I just let her do the job. And we would be able to cycle through and reconnect to see if there was anything that she might need. This was a volunteer who was new in disaster spiritual care. But I gave her the guidance and other points of contact with peers, and she shared it with me on my last day as an RDO way back in Michigan. But it really just touched me that, I mean, I trust my team, and I trust people who want to invest their time and develop and learn. So it was really powerful for me. So it looks like there might be a good series of comments here. Define goals and objectives, clear timelines. We're going to get into that, I think, in one of the tools that we'll share momentarily. A lot of the work is boring, not interesting, feeling guilty delegating this work to volunteers. So to that point, I think I'm never going to presume whether it's in communication or some of the work. I share what all of the opportunities are. And it's tough because what we want to do is a lot of the fun stuff, all of us do. And then sometimes the not so fun stuff or not so rewarding stuff is more administrative in nature. But it still needs to get done. And I just continue to push away the reward and the why some of that stuff has to get done or accomplished. I've got a great volunteer partner that does solely fiscal reviews, and she takes a lot of pride in that work. She gets the need for being very accountable to the dollars that we provide to our clients after a disaster. And she takes a lot of pride in that work too. And it's the one sole thing that she does. She reads thousands upon thousands of cases every year. And it was started with the question of the ask of what interests her. And we just want to be careful that we don't start to close down some of the elements of communication and presuming that it may be boring or not interesting, because there could be people that do. Just showed a guy standing, yep, shucks, it doesn't look like some of the video came through that way, but at least the sound did. Process has always been the end result. Not everyone cares or thinks like me. I think I'll start to chat through some of this stuff, Sherry, if you'd like to continue.
Sounds good. Okay, so this segues into a lot of what we've been talking about, which is team building. And I think one of my greatest passions in the American Red Cross is team building and empowering others. And part of that is because I enjoy seeing others succeed, but also it's because the more the merrier. The more people we can get on board, the better. The better we're going to be able to serve our clients, and the easier all of our work is going to be. So I really have been empowered through delegation, through building up my team. And it has not always been successful, but most of the time it has. And there's always been learning opportunities for both of us. So first, let's talk about team building. We're going to define tasks We're going to define roles. We're going to diversify and build relationships. We're going to recruit and interview. We're going to look for mentorship opportunities. And this one is a huge one for me. We're going to create a safe space to fail and learn. And I still fail, and I try to learn from every failure. In fact, I got called out on the chat this evening about one of the personal comments I made about Donald Rumsfeld, and you're absolutely right. There was no need for that comment. I truly admire him, and that's what I didn't share with you. I don't care for all of his decisions, but I do admire him. But I appreciate that you called me out on it, because it isn't the place for it, and the American Red Cross is totally inclusive. So thank you for that opportunity to learn, and I thank you for creating this safe space for me to fail and to learn from it. So finally, the last step is to delegate. So let's move on and take a look at defining tasks. We want to ask, what is our mission? What tasks are required to achieve our mission? What action items are required to complete each task? And a very cool tool that Ian shared with me, and I've been using it with my virtual government ops team throughout this COVID-19 deployment, is the action planning form. And we're going to take a look at that on the next screen, and I will share it in the files of this chat, and it will also be available on SharePoint. Someone also asked in chat a bit earlier how they can share this with their leadership team and with their team in general. This will all be recorded and available to share. I'll let Kirsten touch on that at the very end, the easiest way to access it. So lastly, we want to delegate the appropriate action items to each specific role. This is the action planning form that I was talking about. And it really just gives a very clear breakdown of all of the different things that you need to identify with any action or task you've been given. So first, define what is the action item. Second, describe the actionable item or the goal that you want to achieve in detail. Define the roles and responsibilities. Who is your action team leader? Who are you delegating this to? Who are the action team members? What is each role and responsibility? And it gives you a spot to describe each team member's role and the associated responsibilities. Look at each action item objectives and strategies. And this is where Ian was talking about the SMART goals and where this comes into it. What will the team accomplish at the conclusion? What defines success? So go through those objectives and strategies and go through what defines the success. Clearly define the action item and when it is due. Consider what are the project issues, risks, and constraints. Are there any known risks of achieving integration planning goals and objectives? Try and look at all of these and throw them on here to get a broad scope of what your task is and all of that defines it. What is the end state vision? What will it look like at the end? What are you trying to accomplish? What will the action achieve? And then finally, signatures and dates for all of those who are involved, so that everyone clearly takes ownership of those roles that they've been given and the tasks that they've taken responsibility for. So now let's talk about defining roles. My role is what? How many roles must be filled to complete this mission? What tasks should be delegated to each role? And then clearly define each role and all of those tasks associated. So when things are delegated, there's no question as to who is doing what. You don't get into the, am I staying in my own lane? It's really clearly defined. Next, Look for opportunities to diversify and build relationships. Diversify your team. Look for those with strengths that are different than your own. Again, this is a learning opportunity for you and for them. I can't tell you how often I see people who try and build teams of people just like them, and they're not as effective as teams with a diverse group of people, with a diverse group of ideas. Again, you all have to be respectful of one another and go into it agreeing it's a safe space to learn, to fail, and to learn from one another's strengths, and to acknowledge that you're not the strongest player in all of them. So next, that leads us into recruiting and interviewing. Recruit candidates for the defined roles. Consider room for growth. Their success provides you an opportunity to learn from them. Their challenges provide them an opportunity to learn from you. So again, this is always a two-way street. Don't feel like you're giving up something wonderful. Feel like you're sharing something, and you might be getting something amazing back in return when you learn something you never imagined. Interview candidates. Don't just go to that same person you've always gone to knowing that they're going to deliver for you. Interview other people that may have talents you're unaware of. Discover them. Is this person a good fit for the defined role? If they're not, look for another candidate. Can they easily achieve the tasks delegated to that role, or is there room for growth? And would they manage their delegated tasks effectively? So all things to consider when you're trying to build up your team and look for a diverse crew that you could learn from and that the whole team could learn from. And this leads to mentorship opportunities. I wouldn't have been able to achieve what I've achieved as quickly as I have achieved it in the American Red Cross if it wasn't for my mentor. And my mentor is not similar to me. I looked for somebody who was very different from myself, who had qualities that were very different from my own, because I knew that there were a lot of places I could grow, but I wasn't going to learn or grow from someone who was like-minded. It's not to say that we disagree on everything, but I wanted to look for someone who could really nurture my weaknesses. So look for opportunities for your team members to grow. Create mentorship opportunities within your team. Maybe you're not the best person to mentor someone else, but maybe you have a team member who would be great at mentoring someone else. Celebrate the achievements of those you mentor as if they were your own, because they are. You gave them that opportunity and they went with it. They achieved and they were successful in what you assigned them. So celebrate that achievement. It is the both of yours. And again, I touched on this a few times, but building a team, they must feel safe. There must be a safe space to fail and to learn, especially when you're delegating. So empower yourself to fail, empower your team members to fail, and empower the learning that comes out of both. Finally, delegate. Delegate exciting tasks your team want to complete. Challenging tasks that will stretch them out of their comfort zone. Not scaring them off, letting them know you're always there to support them, and even take over if absolutely necessary. But challenge them. Let them grow. Encourage them to grow. Give them the repetitive tasks that they can own and manage themselves. I think someone mentioned, you don't want to give away the boring jobs, the mundane jobs. Sometimes You can learn, especially newbies, can learn the most out of those repetitive tasks, and they can really feel like they're successful because they've been given something that they can easily manage. When they're ready to move on to something, they can pass that on and move on to something more. Remember the pyramid. Tasks that will develop individual skill sets and build a stronger team. I try and look for opportunities for my team members as often as possible, not because I'm trying to pass the buck, but because I really want them to take advantage of every opportunity like I've been given to grow and achieve more success so they can pass it on and mentor more people. Tasks that utilize existing team members' strengths. So again, this comes back to interviewing, knowing your team members, looking to them where they are experts will only make you a stronger leader. So remember, slight shifts in behavior can equal big shifts in engagement. Every day, ask more questions, listen more, talk less, ask more, tell less. Listen 1 minute longer to one more worker. Ask team members how they can measure excellence. Treat your team like business partners by sharing information about the organization that you feel is special to share. And these are things that you can do every day to help build up your team. I'm going to let Ian step in it when I finish sharing so he can give you the background and where this came from and share a personal story about it. But other slight shifts in behavior that equal big shifts in engagement that you can do every week. Say to at least one person, that was a good idea, or I appreciate you giving me that feedback. Admit, I don't know, and ask, what do you think of one more person? Sit with a person at lunch just to hear what's going on and don't have an agenda. Each month, ask workers what they have done they feel good about. And each quarter, ask for input on new ways of doing things. Listen intently and work to implement one new idea from your team. So now it's time for any questions you have. It's time for Ian to give us a little bit of history on what I just shared, and I'll go back to that slide if you want me to, Ian.
No, it's all good. We can wait to see if there's some questions if folks want to raise their hand and chime in, because my little bit is nowhere near as important as getting some folks to pick our brains, pick each other's brains. All right. Well, as we wait, and I see Shelly showing appreciation, should be done more than once. Absolutely. I'm going to turn my camera on real quick and show you all a card that I carry with me along with my ID. And this is it's the slight shifts in behavior that bring out big shifts in engagement. And so they're just suggestions. They're some of my guidelines on how to best engage and continue to serve as reminders for me to slow down. And I find sometimes I'll get into some projects with some team members and I'll recognize, when I'm speaking too much, whether I'm getting myself involved in doing things too much, and I'll just step away. And on one relief operation in Hurricane Harvey, we were in a room in District 1 trying to figure something out, and I just left to get a cup of coffee. It was getting a little hectic. But I had faith, and I went and I grabbed the coffee and some bottles of water, brought them back to the room, and they'd solved this. They came to some solutions and threw some ideas at me, and we decided to chart a path forward with some service delivery. But certainly knowing that, the supervisor, the district director, the job director being in the room can be intimidating. I would encourage anybody to also approach me at the very least and say, Ian, we might need you to leave the room in order for us to make some progress, because you're making us a little nervous, and that's okay too. But I became a Strength Finder coach many years ago, and that's where that card comes from. And it's all the same stuff that was on that slide, or those 2 slides, John. So I believe we'll be sharing these slides with everybody. Unfortunately, the card itself is proprietary, but the ideas and the elements are not. So we could always look to even see if we can create something like that for the Pacific Division. I think that might be kind of cool.
I like a comment here. Recruiting team members is a trust practice. You're absolutely right. And it's a challenging practice for many of us to trust and to allow our team members to succeed. And this is where it's also important to create a safe space. So occasionally they are going to fail, and it's okay for them to do that. And that will be a learning opportunity for them, and probably for you too. But it is important for us to continue trusting and to continue mentoring and building.
This is Diane. It looks like there's a couple of hands raised. I don't know if they're mistakes or if somebody has something to say.
Denise, I see your hand raised. Denise Smith, would you like to unmute and share? Tina Sanders, how about you? You have your hand raised. Would you like to share?
No, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that my hand was raised.
No need to apologize at all. I asked you guys to raise them earlier, but never asked you to put them back down.
And now their arms are tired.
I'm so sorry about that.
We had a bigger group this round, and a lot of really good feedback in the chat box. Any other final thoughts or questions from the gang? All right. Well, I think that's all from you and I, Sherry. Kirsten, do you have anything else to close out with the group?
I don't have anything else to close out at this point. Thank you very much for sharing with us. We have it's Tuesday, so we have a couple more nights of confidence builders. So thanks everyone for jumping in. And just a reminder, please finish up your COVID training. We want to get everyone with the right gaps. Diane, anything else to add in?
Nope, not a thing. Great class. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your time. We had a lot of fun.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Great class.
Have a great night. Thank you.
Kirsten, are you going to stop the recording?